Hi, Epic Recaps here, and today I am going to explain to you a 2021 neo-noir thriller titled Nightmare Alley. If you want to be spoiled, keep watching. The film opens, and a man named Stanton Carlisle is dragging a body into the floorboards of his home. He lights his cigarette and then dropping the match, he sets the entire place on fire. Hopping on a bus, he travels some distance to the next town, and upon arriving, he is drawn to the bright lights of a nearby carnival. Stan wanders the grounds and revels in the bustle and noise. He follows a group into a tent, where he watches as the troop leader Clem Hoadley drop a live chicken in a pit. The human geek immediately emerges, and bites off the head of chicken, much to the amusement of the audience. With no money to pay for the show, Stan sneaks off and stumbles upon a couple of carnies named Bruno and Major Mosquito in the back. At first, they think he's a grifter and up to no good, but Bruno changes his mind and offers him $1 to help them pack up before the storm. After proving himself to be useful, Clem invites Stan to join them as they make their way to join another carnival in the next town. When they arrive, Clem shows him to the sleeping quarters and offers him a job, telling him that nobody cares who he is and what he's done in the past. The next morning, Stan decides to stay on and approaches a woman named Madame Zena, who offers him the use of her bathtub for 10 cents. Zena and her alcoholic husband Pete have a clairvoyant act using special codes and cards. When her husband leaves, she persuades Stan to pedal for them, telling him he has what it takes to work the crowd. As time goes on, Stan gets more comfortable with his new home, and a fellow carny named Molly Cahill catches his eye, flirting with her any chance he gets. Spending his days working the crowd for Clem and Zena, Stan manages to bail out a passed-out Pete after he misses his cue during an act. Back at their home, Pete shows Stan his black book of secrets and tells him that he never uses the skills to speak with the dead, adding that a spook show will result in people getting hurt. Leaving the couple, Stan stumbles in on Clem and asks the owner about the large number of bottles he keeps. Clem explains that he brews the alcohol to keep the carnies dependent and to keep them in line. He points out the bottles next to it and tells him that it's wood alcohol, considered to be poison if consumed and not be mistaken for the home brew. One afternoon, Stan delivers a case of alcohol to Pete, and before leaving, he tells the older man that he's a willing learner and asks Pete to teach him some techniques, which he agrees to do. Afterwards, Stan watches Molly complete her electrical current act, and gets an idea to take her act to the next level. He approaches her the next day with his idea and tells her she's too good for the downtrodden carnival. Some time passes and he unveils the chair he built Molly, walking her through the new act he's come up with. His ambitions leave her impressed and Stan is later approached by Bruno, who believes himself to be Molly's protector. He threatens Stan with violence if he did anything to hurt Molly. The pair begin to spend more time together and on one night, Stan tells her he wants to star in his own show and escape poverty as soon as he can, and tries to convince her to leave with him. About to share a kiss, Molly runs back to her caravan and thinking about Stan's idea, she smiles to herself. A dejected Stan returns to the tent and finds Clem, who asks him for help with the geek, who is suffering a head wound and near death. The pair dump his body in a nearby town and stop by a diner for a bite to eat. Stan laments at how any man could sink to such a low level of performing as a geek. Clem explains that he seeks out alcoholics or drug addicts, and lures them in with promises of a temporary job and opium-laced alcohol. Preying on their dependence, he abuses them until they sink into madness and depravity, thus creating a geek show for his carnival. The following weeks are spent with Pete, who's taken Stan under his wing and teaches him some techniques as well as secret codes from his black book. One night, Pete asks Stan to bring him a bottle of Clem's alcohol, which Stan does, not realizing he picked the wrong bottle that Clem previously warned him about. When Pete looks as if he's passed out, Stan uses the opportunity to glimpse at more codes in Pete's book, but is startled when he awakens. The older man warns him of the dangers of desire and ambition, and sends him away. The next morning, Bruno and Major Mosquito arrive at Zena's and the trio run off, discovering Pete's lifeless body. In the days following Pete's death, a group of local police arrive to shut down the carnival. Stan manages to thwart the inspector, using the mind-reading techniques that he learned from Pete, and is hailed as a hero by Clem. With newfound confidence, Stan grows closer to Molly. He eventually convinces her to leave the carnival behind and run away with him. When they start kissing, Bruno catches them and he starts punching Stan, but Molly holds him off and says she loves him and has agreed to go with him. Before leaving, Stan says his farewell to Xena and offers her Pete's book, but she declines to take it. 2 years later, Stan and Molly are starring in a classy New York act called The Great Stanton, where he wears a blindfold and guesses what Molly is holding, using the coded language from Pete's black book. One night, they are approached by a psychologist named Dr. Lilith Ritter who tries to discredit Stan and requests to take Molly's place, asking him to guess what is in her clutch. He manages to correctly guess that she is carrying a pistol and impresses the audience. Stan takes things further and using the initials that Molly previously provided him with, he turns to the old man next to Lilith, and claims to be channeling his dead son. After the show, Molly admonishes him for putting on a spook show, but Stan disagrees, and arrogantly tells her that he saved the act from unraveling. They're interrupted when Judge Charles Kimball requests to meet with him, and reveals that he hired Lilith to ensure that Stan was indeed the real deal and was able to communicate with the dead. Kimball offers him a large amount of money for a private reading, and Molly tries to interject, but Stan quickly accepts the offer, continuing the ruse and further upsetting Molly. Stan later meets with Lilith in her office. She knows he is a con man, but she is intrigued by his methods and suggests she help him exploit New York's elite, since she has several sessions with them recorded. She also begins sessions with Stan, and learns of his role in Pete's death, as well as his own father's. When he arrives home one day, he discovers that Molly has invited his old carnival gang for a visit. He entertains Xena when she offers to do a tarot reading, and when the final card reveals itself to predict Stan's eventual doom, he smugly reminds her that their act is a scam and holds no truth. Stan goes to Kimball's house to meet with him and his wife. He reveals to the couple that Julian died in no man's land, and claims to feel his presence, which is enough to convince them of Stan's abilities, and wants to introduce him to a colleague. After his session, he drops by Lilith's office to offer her half of what Kimball paid him. Finding a kindred spirit in her, they both agree that they're rotten to the core, and he asks her to hold on to the money to prevent Molly from discovering it. Later that evening, Stan is with Molly in the dressing room, and offers to take her away for a short trip, reaffirming his love for her. They're interrupted by Lilith, who tells him that the man Kimball wants to introduce him to is a powerful man named Ezra Grindle. A past patient of hers, she provides him with dirty details from their recorded session. The following day, Stan meets with Kimball and is introduced to the wealthy Ezra Grindle, who wants to speak to his late lover Dory, who died after suffering a miscarriage. They hook him up to a lie detector, and when asked about being a medium, Stan is almost exposed as a liar, until he manages to make claims related to Dory, which convinces the shocked Grindle that he is who he says he is. Shortly after leaving Grindle, Stan visits Lilith's office, requiring more information on his new client. She refuses his request, telling him that Grindle will trace it back to her and they will both get caught. Stan makes a copy of her key and returns that night to listen to Grindle's recorded sessions, in which he reveals his shame for burying Dory in an unmarked grave. With a thriving career, Stan begins an affair with Lilith and the pair continue their scam to exploit Grindle's guilty conscience. During one of their private sessions, Grindle wishes to see Dory again and threatens to end the sessions if Stan is unable to deliver. Stan returns home and tries to convince Molly to fake a seance, since she slightly resembles Dory, based on a sketch that he saw of her. He leaves her before she can respond and tells her he has to gather the props required for the seance. At the Kimball house, Mrs. Kimball has lost her mind and believes that, based on what Stan told her, that she will be reunited with Julian. She shoots her husband in the head before turning the gun on herself. When Stan returns to the apartment, he finds a note left by Molly and catches up with her at the train station. She tells him she found out about the affair, but Stan manages to convince her to stay, promising to end everything after the seance. That night, Stan meets Grindle in the cemetery, where he confesses to Stan that he has hurt many women since Dory's death in an effort to get rid of the anger in his soul. At that moment, Molly appears in a white gown stained with blood and slowly makes her way to Grindle, but keeps distance between them. Stan is unable to hold back Grindle, who runs to Molly and grabs her, falling to his knees. Not able to continue the charade, Molly begins to back away, which gives Grindle pause when he realizes he's been duped. Grindle becomes angered and strikes Molly before threatening Stan. He responds by punching Grindle to death, and they make a run for the car. Anderson appears and tries to stop them, but Stan manages to run him over twice and kills him. The pair stop in an empty alleyway and Stan smashes the window to make it appear like the car was stolen. Molly slaps him and walks away, leaving him for good. Stan returns to Lilith's office to collect his share of the money, and before leaving, he realizes that the money bag is full of dollar bills. Lilith explains that when she tried to expose Stan during his great Stanton performance, he outwitted her and humiliated Lilith in front of his audience. From that moment on, Lilith swore to take revenge on Stan and started digging out his weaknesses to use against him. Revealing her pistol, she shoots Stan in the ear and snidely asks if she's powerful enough for him. Lilith makes a call to the police. Stan manages to get up and attacks her with the phone cord. He's interrupted when the police show up and escapes onto a train before they can catch him. The scene changes to a few years later. Stan is now homeless, broke, and an alcoholic. He ends up at another carnival, where he speaks to the owner and tries to sell his clairvoyant act. The man turns him down and instead offers Stan a drink and a temporary job. Out of options, Stan nods and begins to laugh through sobs when the owner asks him, "Do you know what a geek is?" The end. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a comment down below. For more movie recaps, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button. See you next time.